Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Xbox One X Project Scorpio Edition. Now, at roughly $500 US, this console did launch this past week. My pre-order was delayed, however, but it has finally arrived, and I wanted to share it with all of you. Now, is there a difference really between the Project Scorpio Edition and the regular Xbox One X? Not really. In terms of what you're getting internally, exactly identical. It's really just a matter of branding, and the Project Scorpio Edition is really all about, I would say, enthusiast branding rather than anything else. So with that aside, what is the Xbox One X all about? Well, I could show you the box. This is a smaller console than the PS4 Pro, and they have a little bit of information here. You can see as I have it sideways. You've got a 1 terabyte hard drive, 4K gaming, HDR support, and Xbox One has complete compatibility, backwards compatibility with all pre-existing Xbox One games. So you've got that going for it. But what's really significant about this, and I'm going to start to get it out of the box, a little bit of damage here, if you can see it, even though it was inside of a box, is that unlike the PS4 Pro, which was the first true 4K gaming console, the Xbox One X has quite a bit more horsepower. Now, is it going to be a night and day difference? Not necessarily, and that's what I've seen across most tests. But if like me, you are accustomed to 4K PC gaming, which I have been for years now, and granted, I am spoiled. I will be the first to admit that. It means that you do want a console that we already know isn't going to be able to perform to the same level that, of course, your PC with your NVIDIA or AMD GPU of choice is going to keep up with, but at least something competent. And that's where Microsoft does deserve a lot of credit here, even if they're a year later than PlayStation with their Pro 4, which I have been using since launch and did unbox on the channel. But this was all during trying to climb out of the Hurricane Matthew disaster. The point being is that what Microsoft has done here is pretty much put together what I would consider, in essence, a micro ATX gaming rig, basically the equivalency of a PC, but they've made it affordable enough, which is something obviously that a lot of PCs are not. So as I crack this open, immediately see some paperwork. Let's see the best way for me to do this. Hopefully I'm not scratching up my desk in the process. So we've got some paperwork. I'm going to go ahead and put that aside. And then we have a lot of inserts. So let's see what we've got here. Let's see. Now this is a stand to have the console in a vertical position. It can go horizontal or vertical. So if you want it upright, you have a stand for that. And part of what makes this more powerful is that both this and the PS4 Pro sport AMD CPUs and GPUs, but the GPU inside here has a higher clock speed, and in addition to that, instead of 8 gigs of DDR5 RAM, we are looking at 12. So an impressive amount of RAM. That 1 terabyte hard drive I wish was an SSD, but we can't win them all. We have an included HDMI cable, which of course supports 4K and HDR. And then in here, our controller, which has been tweaked as well. Go ahead and get that open. Now, as you may have noticed, we've got the Project Scorpio branding there, and essentially this reminds me of the day one Xbox, when it launched, the Xbox One, because that's exactly really what it is. So for those of you wondering why they did this, it's because Microsoft already did the exact same thing with the Xbox One X, so why stop there? Control out of the way. They do include batteries for that control, which of course you will need. And let's see what else is in this box. we also have the power cable. Now, what's interesting also, besides the fact that the Xbox One X is more powerful than the PS4 Pro, is that it also actually has less of a power draw. So another good thing in the scope, especially if you're a PC gamer, then you already know that power efficiency is a big deal. And it really should be a big deal to everyone, not just PC gamers, but as long as you're paying for your electricity bill, efficiency is always key. So now that I've gotten everything out of the way, let's finally take a look at this console, shall we? And it is smaller by several inches than the PS4 Pro, but significantly heavier. And that's because instead of trying to spread all the hardware across in the way that PlayStation did with the PS4 Pro and keep their design cues, Microsoft pretty much tried to cram all the new internals into the same form factor as the Xbox One S revision, the Slim. So that is what you're going to be reminded of when I get this out of its shroud here. And I do, again, commend Microsoft on this because, quite frankly, no one else has pushed the envelope this far. I mean, being able to produce a console that, again, does actually speak to, I would say, again, a micro ATX sort of gaming rig is impressive. Now, it is a heavy brick, no question about it. Power supply is built in, for those of you that are wondering. No external power supply. On the back of the unit right here, you can see we've got an array of ports. We have our power port on the far left, HDMI out to your television, then HDMI in from your satellite or cable box in the event that you actually want to use this basically as a pathway or gateway so that you could stay on one input for both gaming as well as watching TV from your provider of choice. Two USB ports right there, an IR blaster port, a optical port, as well as an Ethernet port. And as I mentioned, inside this, and all ventilation around this entire thing, we have essentially the best gaming hardware that a console has ever offered. Now, right there, you can see the slot for the disk drive, I should say, which, by the way, does, as the previous generation, support 4K Blu-ray, something that, of course, the PS4 Pro does not do. But a big difference here is that it's not just an affordable, and it's not affordable, really, in terms of being a 4K Blu-ray player, because you can buy something like that for far less than $500 US. A physical button, which is nice to see, and another one, and a USB port, and, of course, your power button right there. So really what the Scorpio, or I should say the Xbox One X, is all about is bringing something that would traditionally require, I won't say a high-end PC, but I would say a mid-range gaming system that definitely would cost more than $500, because what the Xbox One X does competently pull off is 4K gaming at 30p. Now, bear in mind, if you're a PC gamer like myself, you're accustomed, if you've invested the money like I have, in 4K at 60p. Now, keep in mind also that that means your GPU alone costs more than this entire console. So this is very value-oriented, and again, I think it will help a lot of people who haven't crossed over to true 4K gaming get there. In essence, it may also cannibalize some of the console industry because it may encourage console users to want PCs once they see what a console like this is capable of. Now, there aren't a lot of titles out there that leverage the 4K to its fullest capability. I think Gears supports it, Assassin's Creed. It's a limited list that Xbox has put out right now in terms of titles. This is one of those few console launches where we're not getting a lot of titles, or really any, to go along with the launch, and that's because Microsoft, for the first time, really is playing catch-up. And they've brought to the table some really impressive hardware. Again, the fact that they've got this in a smaller form factor than the PS4 Pro, with the power supply in there, and added 12 gigs over the 8 gigs of DDR5 RAM that the PS4 Pro sports, and then the throughput of the GPU being nearly 2 teraflops more, even though it is, again, an AMD, a very similar AMD GPU. It is a faster one in terms of clock speed and slightly, newer generation. After all, it's a year later. The CPU is pretty much a wash. It's the same 8-core AMD Jaguar, but the clock speed, again, slightly higher. So if you're asking yourself whether or not you should go with something like this as opposed to the PS4 Pro, bear in mind, again, that games have not been fully optimized yet. But of course, as they do become fully optimized, this is going to be the console that will better manage frame rates, that 30p being the highest you're going to get. You're not going to see 60p out of this. For that, you will need a computer. But this is the beginning of bridging the gap between consoles and PC gaming when it comes to making 4K mainstream. And I think that's critical, because once you've gamed in 4K, at least with a good GPU, not one that struggles to handle it, it's very difficult to go back. And I know that's a matter of being spoiled, but now we're getting to a point where you don't have to be spoiled. And that's what the Xbox One X really represents, and the ability to game in 4K at 30p for $500. And then the backwards compatibility with their existing library, of course, is a bonus, something that they kind of missed in the past, and now realize that they really have to embrace as many options for gamers as possible. So I see this as a completely different direction than what they did with the Xbox One, and then of course with the S, which I felt was basically a waste of time, really only induced people to buy a console to get a 4K Blu-ray player, and there you didn't even have true full HDR support. So now we really have all the best bells and whistles that a real 4K console should. So I'm excited to put this through the paces. I'm not expecting to see huge gains over my PS4 Pro, but in the future I am. Of course, this begs the question, what will PlayStation answer with probably in roughly a year from now? And this is the first time, or really second time, where we've seen the console wars go off cycle. PS4 Pro came out, Xbox just said we'll have something for you next year. And that's exactly what we've got. And I'm sure a lot of you waited for it. If you did, then you should buy this without hesitation, whether or not you're involved in either ecosystem with the live service, the subscription annual service for online access for multiplayer is a whole nother story. But for me, to have something that's going to get as best performance as possible in my living room, wherever this console ends up, is really what it's all about. And the Xbox One X right now does have that advantage over PS4 Pro. If you already have a PS4 Pro, I don't think you necessarily should be running out and picking one of these up unless you really have the money to burn, because as I've mentioned, the software isn't quite there yet. But in time, probably when this goes on sale, it will be. But I'm sure this is still going to be highly in demand. After all, it is pretty much sold out everywhere. The Scorpio, like I said, my pre-order was delayed, and that seems to be a common trend. I don't know how they misjudged the supply and demand on this, because after all, Microsoft is one of the biggest companies in the world. But either way, again, I commend them on creating a console of this caliber for $500. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.